Hey, I'm Carlos. Today we're going to be learning how to collect telemetry data from thousands of IoT devices using LavinMQ. We will then take this data, expose it to Prometheus, and visualize it with Grafana for real-time monitoring.
All right. Our objective is to show the humidity and the temperature of the office in Grafana. To do that, we need multiple components. For example, we need an Arduino board connected to some sort of sensor, and then this board needs to connect to the Wi-Fi in the office, and it needs to connect to a LavinMQ instance that is running in the cloud, and it needs to publish that humidity and temperature data to LavinMQ. Once the data is in LavinMQ, then we need to get it out of there. And to do that, we're going to be using Mosquito to Prometheus. Mosquito to Prometheus is then going to expose that data in the form of metrics, which then Prometheus can scrape. Finally, once all the data is in Prometheus, we can use Grafana to show that data in the form of pretty charts. So let me show you real quick what the code looks like for the board. Here is the format that we're going to be using, which is JSON. Here's the topic that we're going to be publishing in, /IoT/ and then the name of our device. Here's the function that is going to read the data from the sensor and then convert it into JSON. So here we are creating or connecting to the Wi-Fi, and then we connect to LavinMQ. And then finally, further down, we are reading that telemetry data. We're going to be printing it out in our serial monitor for debugging purposes only. And then in the end, we do publish to our topic the data that we read from the sensor. This might take a while to compile, so let's start right away. In the meantime, we can have a look at our LavinMQ instance, and here we can see that right now there are 0 connections. In the meantime, we can also have a look at the other part of the setup, which is Docker. We're going to be deploying these 3 components in Docker containers using Docker Compose. Let's have a quick look at that. So if we look into Docker Compose, we can see that we have 3 different services defined: Prometheus, Mosquito to Prometheus, and Grafana. Let's have a look at the configuration of Mosquito to Prometheus. In here, we can see the server configuration and the credentials and the topic path. The topic path is where Mosquito to Prometheus is going to be listening for events, and is going to assume that anything after this last slash, so where the plus is going to become the device ID. It also knows how to interpret JSON. And so what we're telling it here is that we're interested in the temperature field of that JSON object together with the humidity and the heat index. After that, we also need to configure Prometheus, where we have just one single job called weather devices, in which there is only one target, which is Mosquito to Prometheus. Now, the host name is looking a little bit weird. So if you're wondering where that is coming from, it's coming from here. Since these containers are deployed in the same network, that means that we can rely on service discovery rather than on IP addresses to communicate with each other. Let's bring Docker Compose up. Cool. Our containers are up and running, and we can see that there is already one connection, so that must be our board. Let's have a look. And indeed, here we can see that our board has already started sending messages to the topic. The connection has also ramped up to 2, and that means that Mosquito to Prometheus is also up and running. Remember, there is 2 different components talking to LavinMQ at this point in time. We can also see that the data rate has increased. So let's load up Prometheus to see what is going on. If we come to status and target health, we can see that our weather device's job is up and running. And if we try to query, for example, for temperature, here we can see the reading for the temperature of our Skellefteå device ABC123, the humidity, and the heat index. Great. Now let's put this in a chart in Grafana. So if we open up Grafana, since this is the first time that we're loading up Grafana, it's going to require the default credentials, which in this case is admin. And because admin is not a great credential to have, Grafana is asking you to set it to something actually safe. But for the sake of this demo, we're just going to leave it the same. Now we need to tell Grafana about our data source, which is Prometheus in this case. And remember that they are deployed in the same Docker network, so they can talk to each other using service discovery. So here simply we're going to punch in Prometheus on port 9090, save and test. So that was successful, which is great. And we can start building our dashboard. So let's start adding immediately a visualization using Prometheus as the source. And then we're going to get the temperature, run that query, and here we can see that the temperature is already being shown. However, it's a bit too long of a range, so let's try to do maybe the last 15 minutes. We can also change the panel title to temperature. And here in the legend, this is looking a little bit odd, maybe a little bit too long even. But we can change that and we can say that, you know what, we're actually interested in the sensor name. So that's looking much better. And the last thing that we can do is to tell it what kind of data type or unit it is, which is in our case, Celsius. So we scroll down to unit and we punch in Celsius. Here it is. Good. That's looking much better. Let's apply that and add another visualization. In this case, we're going to be getting the humidity. Let's run the query to see what that looks like. Great. Let's change the panel title to humidity. We're going to change the legend as well, same as before. And we are going to set the unit to %. Nice. This spike from 31 to 32% seems a bit dramatic. And that is because Grafana is trying to be smart about how it shows your data based on previous data. But in our case, we know that the humidity can only be between 0 and 100. So then we can set our minimum and maximum value here. So the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100. That looks much better. So we can apply that. And finally, we can add another visualization. In our case, is similar to temperature. So what we can do is we can duplicate that, but then we can change this to be the heat index. And for that, we also need to change the metric to heat index. Let's run the query. And that is looking nice. We don't need to change the unit because it's already set. So we apply that. And don't forget to save the dashboard. And we're going to call this office weather stations. Great. Let's go back to our graphic and figure out what we did. Now, the objective was to show the temperature and the humidity of the office in Grafana. But we went rather quickly through each one of the steps. So if you are interested in learning how to do this yourself and go at a much slower pace and much more into detail, we're going to be pasting a link to a blog post that we wrote with all the details for this setup, including the source code for the Arduino board, for the Docker Compose file, etc. Thank you so much for watching.